My name is Bella, and I just graduated from high school. I lived with my parents, Sarah and Nestor Brockie, in a modest two-story house in Pennsylvania. This is where I spent my childhood, and where I had to watch my older brother David always be the center of attention, surrounded by the care and generosity of his parents. David is 7 years older than me. He is 25. He has always been the golden child in our family. As soon as he showed the slightest interest in anything, my parents immediately seized the opportunity to support his passion. Hockey? The most expensive equipment. Drawing? The best art supplies. Skateboarding? An individually ordered board. They didn't care that in a few months he would get tired of it all and be thrown into the far corner of the garage. They were just waiting for his next whim. I've learned not to expect much attention to myself. I realized this especially clearly one Christmas. The week before the holiday is David's birthday. He turned 16 that year, and his parents gave him the gift he dreamed of, a powerful, super expensive gaming computer. He talked about it non-stop, and of course they didn't spare a fortune for it. And then Christmas came. I woke up in anticipation, if not of something grandiose, but at least of some kind of attention. But when I got to the tree, all that was waiting for me there was a postcard with a dry inscription, "Merry Christmas." "I'm sorry, dear," Mom said, tiredly straightening a lock of hair. "This year we have absolutely no money left." I nodded. It wasn't the first time. David's birthdays have always turned into lavish celebrations with gifts and surprises. And mine, at most, a small cake, a new shirt, or some school supplies. No parties, no special celebrations. So when my parents sat me down in the living room and announced with some unnatural enthusiasm that they wanted to throw a big party in honor of my 18th birthday, I just couldn't believe my ears. "A party?" I asked, feeling the coffee cup tremble in my hands. "Sure, honey," Dad said, beaming like he'd just won the lottery. "We will invite the whole family. We will make a real holiday out of it." I sat there, looking at them and trying to figure out where the catch was. Parents never changed their habits for nothing. Something's happened. "Why now?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "Well, you're graduating from high school. You're going to college soon." Mom waved her hand nonchalantly. "Now everything is different. You're growing up." I nodded, but an inner voice told me that something was wrong. It was too sudden. But the more days passed, the more I began to believe that maybe I was really wrong. Maybe my parents finally realized that I also deserve attention. Mom was on the phone all the time, discussing the details of the party. She ordered an expensive cake from the best bakery in town, discussed the decorations, and carefully compiled a guest list. They were really preparing. And I decided, since fate is giving me something pleasant for the first time, I will accept this gift. I didn't know how wrong I was yet. I opened my mouth to reply, but before I could utter a single word, Mom stepped forward with a smile stretched like a string. "Bella applied to several colleges, Mom," she quickly interjected, as if she was afraid I would say something wrong. "We are very proud of her." I felt a surge of irritation inside me. They didn't mention that I did it on my own, without their help. That I pored over my textbooks at night, worked after school to save up for applying, while they spent money on David's latest whims. Really? Grandma turned to me, her gaze softened. "And where did you go, dear?" I opened my mouth, but I didn't get a word in again. "To very good universities," Mom said hurriedly, looking at Grandma with undisguised tension. "We are sure that she will choose the best option." I clenched my fists. They don't even know where I applied. They never cared. But Grandma noticed my expression. Her brows furrowed slightly, and before Mom could add anything else, she covered my hand with her warm palm. "Let's go for a walk, honey. Tell me about everything yourself." I took a quick glance at my parents. They were smiling, but there was concern in their eyes. I could see Mom nervously tugging at the edge of her sleeve, while Dad stood huddled a little to the side. I just nodded to Grandma and took her arm. We walked slowly along the garden path. The air was fresh, not yet saturated with the stuffiness of noon. Grandma was silent, allowing me to collect my thoughts. "You know this party isn't for me, right?" I finally said, unable to stand it. Grandma stopped. I looked at her, expecting to see surprise, but there wasn't a shadow of doubt on her face. "Of course I know, baby," she said softly. "You don't think I'm blind, do you?" I swallowed. "They're doing all this for you. To show what wonderful parents they are. To convince you to keep helping them." She stared at me for a long time before taking a deep breath. I guessed that something was wrong. "They've never given me parties," I blurted out, my voice cracking with emotion. "Never. They gave me postcards for Christmas because all the money went to David. Each of his interests is a new chance to spend hundreds of dollars on him. What about me? I had to ask for permission to buy a new notebook for school." I felt tears coming to my eyes. Grandma squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, honey." I shook my head. "I just don't understand. Why now? Why did they suddenly decide to portray caring parents?" Grandma sighed, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Because they know that I don't approve of their attitude towards you." I froze. "They're afraid that if I see things the way they are, I'll stop helping them." Anger flared up in me with renewed vigor. "So it's just a performance?" "Yes, baby," she said with a sad smile. "A performance staged especially for me." When we returned to the house, the backyard was almost ready. The tables were covered with white tablecloths decorated with floral arrangements. Balloons, pink, white, and gold, fluttered in the light breeze. Waiters were bustling everywhere, setting up snacks, drinks, and appliances. I looked at all this and felt some kind of inexpressible feeling growing inside me. It wasn't joy, anticipation, or gratitude. It was a disappointment. I heard my mom's voice. "Oh, Bella. It's so good that you're back. Go try on the dress we ordered for you." I looked at her. She was beaming, but I could see through that smile now. It was a mask. "What dress?" I asked, barely keeping my voice steady. "We ordered it especially for you, dear. It's perfect for such a special day." I shook my head. "I don't need your dress." Mom blinked, her face contorted in confusion for a second. "But you want to look beautiful, don't you?" I saw my grandmother's lips twitch in a restrained smile. "Bella," my mother began, but at that moment a tall figure appeared in the courtyard. I turned around and felt something shrink inside me. It was David. I hadn't seen him in years, and now he was standing in front of me, grown up, casually but impeccably dressed, with his trademark self-confident smile on his face. "You've finally appeared," he said, spreading his arms wide, as if his appearance was my birthday present. I just stared at him, not knowing what to say. "Well, sis," he continued, grinning. "Are you ready for the best party of your life?" I took a slow breath, trying not to show my emotions. I was no longer the girl who stood by the tree empty-handed, watching him unwrap expensive gifts. But he doesn't seem to have figured it out yet. I stared at the receipt, feeling the world around me lose focus. The numbers on the paper seemed to pulse, becoming clearer and blurred. $100,000. This amount was something unreal, something that existed only in other people's lives, but definitely not in mine. Grandma Eleanor smiled at me with kindness. There was something approving but at the same time probing in her gaze. She was waiting for my reaction. I raised my head, looking for my parents. Their faces seemed frozen, as if they had become statues in a museum of bad decisions. Mom was still clutching the crumpled napkin. Her knuckles were white. Dad seemed to have forgotten how to breathe. Grandma, The voice trembled treacherously. I swallowed, trying to control my emotions. I do not know what to say. Say thank you, dear, she prompted softly, patting my hand. And promise me you'll take this chance. I nodded, barely aware of what was happening. Thanks. I heard my own voice, but it sounded like it came from somewhere else, as if it didn't belong to me. The guests whispered admiringly and exchanged glances. Aunt Nanzia clapped her hands, and Uncle Basilio nodded contentedly. One of the cousins whistled appreciatively. But while everyone was cheering, the only two people whose opinions really mattered looked like they had just lost everything that was valuable to them. Mom? Dad? I looked at them. Mom quickly put on a smile, but she looked like she had just been stabbed in the back. What a generous gift, Mom, she said, her voice high and strained. Indeed, my father muttered, looking at the check as if it were a death sentence. But Grandma didn't seem to notice their reactions, or just wasn't paying attention. Well, she said cheerfully, turning back to me. I think you can choose where you want to go now, right? I nodded, feeling something strange come over me, a mixture of elation and anxiety. At that moment, the sound of a door slamming was heard in the courtyard. All heads turned. David stood in the doorway. He looked immaculate, as always, with perfectly coiffed hair, an expensive watch on his wrist, and effortless confidence in every move. He looked around the courtyard, the guests, then his gaze stopped at his grandmother, then at his parents. And finally, on me. Oh, you finally decided to show up, I couldn't help but be sarcastic. David grinned and shrugged his shoulders. Sorry, sis, things are going on. You know business doesn't wait. He walked around the courtyard, shook hands with Uncle Basilio, nodded to Aunt Nanzia, and exchanged a joke with one of his cousins. He didn't need to be reminded that he had always been the star of the family. What did I miss? What is it? He asked, sitting down on one of the chairs. The guests started talking again, discussing my gift. David frowned when he heard the amounts and slowly turned his gaze to me. So, Grandma decided to invest in your future, right? There was something strange in his voice. I crossed my arms over my chest. Yes, I have decided. His eyes narrowed, and he glanced at his parents. They sat as if cornered, not knowing what to say. And then David smiled. But it wasn't his usual cocky smile. There was something else about her. Well, that's just great, he drawled, his voice too even, too measured. My fingers curled into a fist. Something was wrong. After Grandma's toast, the party continued, but the atmosphere changed. The parents looked as if they had been replaced, walking tense, stiff, watching every movement of the grandmother. David, although he seemed relaxed, behaved differently, not as usual. He did not play the role of the center of the universe, nor did he tell his usual stories about big business. He was watching. Follow me. I could feel his eyes on me even when he wasn't looking directly. I knew that look. It was the look of a predator waiting for the moment. Something told me that he hadn't just appeared at that moment. When Grandma went inside to talk to someone on the phone, David suddenly came up to me. I frowned. Why? I just want to talk. I hesitated, but eventually followed him to the edge of the garden, away from the others. Are you up to something? I asked bluntly, crossing my arms over my chest. He chuckled. Relax, Bella. I just wanted to know, don't you think it's kind of unfair? I frowned. What's unfair? David sighed, pretending to be sympathetic. Well, you know. Grandma has always been supportive of you, She's always been on your side. And our parents? They've done so much for you. I laughed. Are you serious? So many things. You mean Christmas cards and forgotten birthdays? David looked at me for a long moment. I'm just saying, you know that my parents were counting on my grandmother's help. I clenched my fists. Ah, so we've come to the main point, right? They don't care about my future. They only care about their grandmother's money. He didn't answer. But there was enough in his eyes. Don't act like you care, David. I abruptly turned around, preparing to leave. But he stopped me by grabbing my arm. Think about it, Bella. His voice became lower, more insistent. 100,000 is a lot of money. Parents, they invested in us. Into me, yes, more, but still. Don't you feel like you owe them something? I pulled my hand away. I don't owe anyone anything. I turned around and walked back to the house, feeling anger building up inside me. Something told me that this was just the beginning. There was an oppressive silence in the room. I looked at my parents, unable to believe that they had actually said it out loud. Do you want me to give David the money for my education? I repeated slowly, as if hoping that when they heard how absurd it sounded, they themselves would realize the absurdity of their proposal. But no. Dad nodded, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Mom folded her hands on the table and leaned forward, feigning sympathy. You see, honey, your brother is in a difficult situation. We're all family. We have to support each other. I exhaled sharply, feeling anger boiling inside. Support each other? I repeated, looking her straight in the eye. Where was this support when I was studying the material at night because you couldn't afford to pay for additional classes for me? Where was the support when I was working after school to save up money to apply to universities? Mom frowned, and Dad frowned, but I didn't let them get a word in. You've never helped me, I continued, my voice trembling, not from fear, but from rage. But every time David wanted something, you gave up everything just to fulfill his whim. Do you think I've forgotten how on his 16th birthday you bought him a gaming computer for thousands of dollars, and on Christmas you gave me a postcard? Bella, this is completely different, Dad tried to insert, but I just laughed bitterly. Something else? Let's just say it out loud, my voice cracked. David has always been your favorite, and I am just an addition to the family. Mom paled, and David rolled his eyes. Oh, my God, the drama, he muttered, shaking his head. I turned to him, literally fuming. Do you even have the gall to sit here and be silent? I said through my teeth. Did you throw money around, live like a king, and think you could get away with anything? I was working, he snapped. You've been squandering money, David. And now you want me to pay for your mistakes? He curled his lips into a sneer. It's just money, Bella. No, this is my life. I turned back to my parents. Do you really want me to give my money to David? I asked, my voice icy now. Dad looked away. Well, not all of them, he muttered. We just need a little bit to help him, Mom chimed in. He will return everything. I chuckled. Really? I crossed my arms over my chest. And when? After all, he was so successful in financial management that he took out loans, which he now cannot repay. David narrowed his eyes. You're being selfish, he said. I laughed, a short, angry laugh. Are you serious? Am I being selfish? I shook my head. No, David, you've always thought only of yourself. You were the one who lived like money grows on trees. And now that you've had the consequences, do you want me to pay for it? He stood up abruptly, the chair creaking on the floor. You don't even know what I've been through. Oh, poor David, I chuckled. Can you tell me how hard it was on your luxury vacation in Hawaii? His face turned purple. "Shut up, Bella. You're in no position to tell me what to do, brother." I turned to my parents. "My answer is no." Mom threw up her hands. "Bella, think about it." "I've already thought about it." I stood up. "It's my money. And I'm not going to give them to a man who's been spitting at me all his life." "Bella," Dad's voice became more stern. "What?" I stared at him. "Are you threatening me? Will you try to take them away? Then I'll just leave. I'll take this money and disappear." I wasn't bluffing. I really would have left. I saw Mom cringe when she realized I wasn't joking. "I'm disappointed in you," I said softly. "You didn't throw this party for me. You did it for Grandma. And now that she's given me a chance at a future, you want to take it away." Dad clenched his jaw. Mom looked like she was ready to cry. David just stared at me. "You're going to regret this," he said. "I don't think so," I retorted. I turned around and walked out of the kitchen, leaving them sitting in the silence they deserved. Grandma Eleanor slowly closed the door and then turned to me. Her gaze slid over my face, lingered on my wrist, where a dark bruise was already beginning to appear under the skin. "Sit down," she said softly, pointing to an overstuffed armchair in the living room. I obediently lowered myself, feeling the tension drain from my body, leaving only exhaustion in its wake. Grandma sat down opposite, folding her hands in her lap. Her face remained calm, but I could see anger flashing in the depths of her eyes. "Tell me everything," she said. "From beginning to end." I took a deep breath and started talking. She didn't interrupt. She didn't shake her head, groan, or sigh. She just listened. And when I finished, there was a dull, heavy silence in the room. Grandma slowly stood up. "So they locked you up." Her voice was steady, but there was something dangerous in it. I nodded. She went to the fireplace, where there were old family photographs on a shelf. I picked up one of the pictures, a black and white photo of my parents when they were very young. I stared at it for a few seconds, and then I just put it in the drawer. "I'll call them," she finally said. "Grandma." I wanted to protest, but she raised her hand, stopping me. "I'll call them. And I'll tell you that you're safe. That you're staying here. And that if they try to approach you, I will sue them for domestic violence." My heart leapt. Are you serious?" "Absolutely." Grandma looked at me in a way that left me in no doubt. "They thought I was just a wallet that could be opened over and over again. They thought I'd turn a blind eye to how they've treated you all these years." She turned to me, and there was iron in her eyes. They were wrong. The next hour passed in a fog. Grandma went into the office, closed the door, and was on the phone. I didn't hear what she said to them, but when she came out, her face was impenetrable. "They won't bother you anymore," she said. "What did you tell them?" She smiled slightly, but there was no warmth in that smile. I reminded them who actually financed their house. Their cars. Their lives. I reminded them that I have lawyers. And that if they ever try to contact you without your permission, they'll have to find a new roof over their heads. I blinked at him. Did they obey?" Grandma chuckled. "Oh, they tried to object. But at some point, your father just hung up on you." I didn't know what to say. So I can stay." She sat down next to me and took my hand in her warm palms. "Honey, you're already home." The next day, for the first time in a long time, I woke up without fear. The sun broke through the curtains, filling the room with a soft golden light. I lay in bed, feeling a quiet, unusual calmness spreading in my chest. I am free. I was no longer the girl who lived in David's shadow. Who was waiting for her parents to finally pay attention to her? Who accepted less because she was told it was the right thing to do? I chose myself. I got up, went to the window, and breathed in the morning air. And for the first time in a long time, she smiled. I looked at them, feeling a strange, icy calm. Not anger. Not pain. Just emptiness. Do you really think that I will be your intermediary? I asked, folding my arms across my chest. After everything you've done? Mom took a deep breath, as if she was preparing for a long conversation, but I immediately raised my hand, silencing her. No, Mom. I don't want to hear excuses. I don't want to hear how you hope to establish a relationship. They exchanged glances, and Dad was the first to break the silence. Bella, we didn't want this to happen. I narrowed my eyes. Oh, yeah. I nodded, pretending to agree. You didn't want to lock me in my room. You didn't want to threaten me with exile. You didn't want to deprive me of my future for David's sake. They looked away. We did a terrible thing, Mom admitted. Her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her blouse. I nodded. Yes, that's right. There was an awkward silence. But you do understand, Bella, Dad said carefully, we just found ourselves in a difficult situation. I chuckled. Yes, I understand. You are in a difficult situation. Therefore, we decided that the easiest way would be to destroy my future in order to save David. Mom was startled by my voice. But now you can fix everything, Dad added, his voice becoming soft, almost coaxing. If you just talk to Grandma. I leaned forward, glaring at him. Let's get this straight, I said, slowly savoring each word. You don't want to restore relations with me. You want to get along with Grandma because you can't live off her anymore. Dad pursed his lips. Mom sighed heavily, as if she had finally decided to take off her mask. We need that money, Bella, she said bluntly. I know, I nodded. But that's not my problem. They exchanged glances again. Now their faces expressed not remorse, not regret, but disappointment. Disappointment in me. I realized that this was the end. Do you understand that there is no way back for me? I asked quietly. Dad tensed up. Bella, we're your parents. Parents? I smiled bitterly. Parents take care of their child. His parents support him. His parents don't threaten him, lock him in a room, or try to deprive him of his future for the sake of another child who has lived his whole life as if money were falling from the sky. Mom opened her mouth, but then snapped it shut. I continued. You've been trying to manipulate me all these years. And do you know what has changed? I straightened up. You have no power over me anymore. Dad turned pale. You can't just cut us out of your life, Mom said softly. I looked at her and slowly tilted my head. Why not? Silence. You have already made your choice. You chose David. You have chosen money. I pressed my lips together, then exhaled and stood up. And now I choose myself. I picked up my bag and slung it over my shoulder. Bella, please, Mom tried to stop me, but I raised my hand. No. I'm leaving. Don't look for me. I turned around and left the coffee shop. They didn't try to stop me anymore. I didn't know how to get back to the dorm. I walked across campus, feeling everything inside me tremble. I did it. I'm free. I didn't turn around. I didn't check my phone. I didn't expect them to follow me. They pushed me away from themselves. When I returned to the dorm, Sarah, my roommate, looked up at me curiously. Are you okay? I nodded. Yes, I replied. And for the first time in my life, it was true. Autumn in Brinton was beautiful. Golden leaves swirled in the air, covering the paths with a soft carpet, and a fresh breeze brought the aroma of coffee from nearby cafes. I enjoyed every day on campus, absorbing knowledge, making plans, discovering a world that previously seemed inaccessible. But the past, no matter how distant it seemed, still had a habit of coming back. One evening, when I was sitting in the library working on a research paper, my phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Bella, this is David. We need to talk." I stared at the screen, feeling an old, familiar wave of irritation rise inside. David always showed up at the most inopportune moments. I answered shortly, without taking my eyes off the monitor. It took a few minutes before he wrote again. "Just meet me. I'm near the campus." I rolled my eyes. Of course he was there. David never did anything without a second thought. We met at a small cafe nearby. I arrived later than promised and saw him at a corner table. He looked different than in my last memories. His usually flawless image was marred by a tired look, slight unshaven hair, and bags under his eyes. "Well, what do you want?" I asked, sitting down across from him. David leaned back in his chair, folding his arms over his chest. "You won't change, will you?" "What do you mean?" He sighed, looking down at me as if I were still that girl who stood timidly in the shadow of his brilliant existence. "I've been trying to get things right, Bella. Honestly. But everything went to hell. You put yourself in this situation." "Maybe so." He shrugged his shoulders. "But, we're a family." I snorted. "Oh, are we a family now?" He leaned forward. "Look, I know we screwed up. I understand that my parents screwed up. But do you really think you can just turn your back on us?" I narrowed my eyes. "Haven't you been doing this all your life?" David tensed up. "It's not the same thing." "I think it's exactly the same thing," I snapped. "You use your parents the same way they used me. The only difference is that you're out of the game now." He drummed his fingers on the table nervously. "Listen, I need your help." I rolled my eyes. "Of course. David only comes to me when he needs something." He sighed in exasperation. "You don't want your parents to end up on the street, do you?" I froze. "What?" He nodded, as if anticipating my reaction. "They mortgaged the house. Grandma refused to help, and I don't have the means to repay all my debts yet. If we do nothing, they will be evicted." A strange feeling shot through me, not pity, no, but rather the realization of how far everything had gone. "These are your consequences," I said flatly. "All three of you have brought yourself to this." "Bella," his voice softened. "I know you're angry." "I'm not mad," I interrupted. "David, understand. I am no longer the little girl who looked at you, begging for love. I'm not living your life. I am not a part of this chaos." He bit his lip. "You really don't want to help?" I shook my head. "No." I returned to the dorm feeling relieved. For the first time in my life, I was free. I made a choice. I chose myself. And now I had to see where this choice would lead. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.